Hey all, Scott here. I'm leaving the door open now. I don't know, air's fun. Been on a good streak lately. Air jumped the shark. I have it all now. Scoliosis, mitosis, bed bugs, bed bats. So I got some free time to kill as I heal up. I might be able to actually play some of these games here. Or shapes. Fuck them. They make everything more complicated. Without shapes, I wouldn't care about the Wii U and GameCube boxes being the same thing. You ever have those things with a medium you enjoy that you overly care about that nobody else seems to? Like you're a big fan of numbers, but man, you're really into 7. I have that thing with video games. See, I should care more about what's inside the box, but man, I'm too busy wondering what the hell these letters are on Mario Sunshine's cover. I love playing video games, but sometimes I love everything surrounding them just as much. I love the little details of the art, the marketing, what these things are gonna look like on my shelf. And when a new console is releasing, it's pretty much on par with expecting a child. You have to get the room all prepared for the arrival, picturing what it'll look like next to the rest of your children in Sega Saturn. It's a big deal. This will be your life for the next hour until you get bored, so it's important to plan ahead. And what makes that easier is when they reveal what the game boxes for that system are gonna look like. Dog shit, they look like dog shit. Every game system has what I like to call the box art templates. The people behind the game create their own art to represent their product, but they have to take into consideration the fact that their art had to slide onto this here template to sell a copy. All Nintendo Switch games look like this, art with an eyesore in the corner. All GameCube games look like this, art with love handles. All 3DO games look like this for some reason. All systems follow a template with their physical games and use specific containers so virginity doesn't spread. Now, many will probably say, Scott, that doesn't matter. Well, neither does life. Live with it. Sure, no single box art template excites me now. I've mellowed out over the years. But this stuff legitimately interests me. I love seeing the differences between packaging on each console, how you can represent an entire system's objectives and brand via a simple box with enough room for custom artwork to flourish. Making sure the packaging design of any product is clear enough to denote exactly what it's for is important. Using the logic of it doesn't matter basically means everything on a store shelf should be in a blank cardboard box. Who cares what's inside anyways? I just want to buy the PS4 Spider-Man. Nope, that's a gun. So let's take a look at all the major consoles throughout history and rate their packaging templates, starting with the Magnavox Odyssey. I do like 7. Being the first game console ever, the Odyssey was a true revolution, offering different games by plugging in different cartridges with an asterisk after every word there. This means nothing to me. Let's move over to the Atari 2600, where they had a variety of different box art designs. There wasn't a true standard. Pretty much every game publisher had their own design templates for not only the boxes, but sometimes the cartridges as well. These are all Atari 2600 games. They're like snowflakes. It's hard to tell what game system many of these cartridges are for, which I think is one of the major reasons box art was sort of standardized across each console afterwards. Some of these games barely even mention the system, so this is what it's like to have a gluten allergy. Now, the Atari published games usually followed the same templates. However, they did change it up quite a bit over time. Colored borders with big art, colored borders with small art, silver borders with big art, silver borders with small art, and the cartridges themselves range from the same damn thing as the boxes to a thesis statement. The lack of consistency across not only Atari 2600 boxes, but pretty much most game consoles around this time definitely added to some confusion consumers faced when it came to video games. The fact that all of these games are for different consoles and you can barely tell was a problem. But the lack of consistency across the board wasn't really an issue when you got it in your home. Does it really matter that this Atari box looks different from this Atari box? No, because everybody just threw these boxes away. They were cardboard. It's not like you'd gain anything from keeping a box and living in the 70s. I will say though, the box art templates that allowed the artwork to shine while also clearly denoting that, yes, this is in fact a waste of time, are definitely the best, as these ones where 70% of the space is taken up by anything but the game in question are fans of the term not ideal. Imagine being surrounded by 10 inches of silver and saying, I matter. Either these game boxes didn't tell you what console the game was for, or it couldn't get enough of telling you what console the game was for. Something had to change, and who better than Sega to fuck up this good? The 8-bit era is upon us, out with the garbage cardboard boxes and in with Nintendo, you swine. The boxes for the NES followed a similar format to Atari's. Most of Nintendo's own offerings would use the same template, while third parties were left on their own. At the very least, each licensed game for the NES featured the distinct Nintendo logo and the Nintendo seal of quality, which makes it fairly obvious what system these are for. But Nintendo did follow a few templates themselves with their box art, most notably the black box games. See, there was a problem with a lot of Atari titles. You'd see this box and end up getting catfished. Nintendo had no shame with showing consumers exactly what the game was gonna look like on the box itself, so many of their early titles for the console followed the black box template. Space-looking background, angled title, taken sprites from the game and crammed them all together, genre. I mean, yeah, This is what a graphic in pinball looks like, but seeing this on its own does not make me think pinball. Some of these games just do not lend themselves well to the black box template. The sports games, arcade games, sure, those are easily understandable based on the one screenshot they use, but when you get to the funky shit like Clue Clue Land, white kids saw this box and said, "Mom, that one." Nintendo actually kept using this format for a few titles, changing it up with a silver background for Metroid and Kid Icarus. But as time went on and the NES was more accepted by society and people sort of knew better what to expect from the games they bought, the black box template was no longer needed and we got some more elaborate designs. No clear template was used for a while outside of sometimes having a tagline in the corner or something. But then, they introduced the Nintendo Entertainment System header. It was red and small. Like ants. They finally got around to standardizing the look of NES games and boxes with this simple header. It only took them until people stopped giving a shit. This style of NES box art started being used around the time the Super Nintendo became a thing. Great. So NES boxes looked pretty inconsistent, but at least the cartridges are all in the same boat. I love the designs of these things. You have the little indent making it easy to pull off the shelf. They stand up well in multiple ways, making them a dream to store and not play. The labels are the perfect size, extending to the side, showing off the title, with many of the logos being big enough to be easy to read, but not too easy, thank God. These cartridge designs are fantastic. The boxes could have been a bit more standardized, but at the very least, it made way for some amazing art. And hey, if we want something that has the exact opposite strengths and weaknesses, let's check out the Sega Master System, my best nightmare. So, this is innovative, a plastic case. The cardboard boxes may have been more cost effective, but everybody just chucked those in the trash once they plucked the game out. The Master System's boxes were hard plastic with places to store the game and instruction manual, making people realize, oh God, I have responsibilities. It's time to take care of your games. Put them up on the shelf, keep them in a safe container. It'll keep it safe, I swear. In regards to the plastic case, the Master System truly innovated. Everything else, where do I begin? The general format of the Master System's box art was graph paper, blue text, clip art, you're welcome. This doesn't feel like a video game, this feels like homework. And then when we pop the box open and look at the cartridge design, they go to all this trouble of extending the label off to the side, but they don't write the name of the game on it? What's the point of the label extending then? As time went on, many Master System games had more elaborate box art while still maintaining the general aesthetic, though in other regions the box art template would sometimes vary. That's the thing, based on where you are in the world, they'd oftentimes have different templates for the game cases. I mean, over in Japan, the Japanese equivalent to the NES, the Famicom, was just a giant color and shape mystery show in terms of what the boxes and cartridges looked like. But with the introduction of the Game Boy, things were finally starting to become standardized. This is a Game Boy game box in North America and Europe, featuring a fat sidebar denoting Game Boy. The sides of the cardboard box were generally just the game in question's logo. The Game Boy boxes may have been pretty basic, but they got the job done and were incredibly effective. As years went on, it was becoming less and less ideal to just have whatever you felt like denote what system your game was for on the box. Sure, NES games would always say, this is for the Nintendo Entertainment System, but it would normally be in a completely different spot each and every time. As more and more systems were coming out, you had to be clear as day what system your game was for. In Japan, Game Boy boxes were slightly different, but were generally labeled as Game Boy in the corner. I mean, they weren't as loud as they were over here. The Game Boy logo is so big on our boxes, it's like they were expecting consumers to refuse to believe this was on Game Boy. No, this can't be! Moving on to the Sega Genesis, they kept with the plastic cases the Master System had, go them. And instead of regular graph paper, they inverted it. Absolutely classic looking boxes here. The black background feels so Genesis. The white background of the Master System boxes felt so out of place, like they just spun a wheel and decided, yep, that's what we're doing today. Not only does the coloring fit the tone of the Genesis, but we get much more fleshed out artwork for some games, unlike the singular PNG of many Master System ones. Here's my problem though. While this template was pretty standardized across the library, it wasn't standardized. Various games, even Sega published ones, used completely different templates, sometimes having full spreads of artwork across the spine. Even the games that used the same templates didn't follow them one-to-one. The Sega Genesis logo changes size and placement constantly. The size of the artwork on the front is different on various games. The placement of the UPC code is always up in the air. It's not a big deal. It's incredibly easy to tell what's a Genesis game and what's not. It's just weird they'd set a template for Genesis boxes, but wouldn't follow it 100%. Now, at least most of the cartridges are pretty in line with each other, except for the ones done by Electronic Arts. Those look completely different. and balls. It's a long story as to why some companies made different looking Genesis cartridges even when they were officially endorsed by Sega themselves. To sum it up, basically, some companies, specifically EA, wanted a better licensing agreement when it came to releasing their games on the Sega Genesis. Sega basically told them, what are you gonna do, reverse engineer the Genesis and find a way to make your own game cartridges so you can release as many Genesis games as you want without our involvement? Guess what happened? Sega didn't want to lose out on the profits with these companies and reluctantly gave them their seal of approval, and that's why some Genesis games have a tart yellow mole. After a while, Sega introduced a new style of Genesis packaging, this one taking cues from the Game Boy boxes, featuring a large banner on the side denoting, guess who? This new style was red all over and I do quite like it. While the black boxes are far more endearingly retro, these simply look really nice. Like ants. The tone of red color and stripes change a bit between boxes alongside the Genesis logos, but these look really cool next to each other until they cheaped out. Later in the Genesis's life, Sega opted out of the plastic cases and went with cardboard. Are you kidding me? While they feature the same red template, this is an obvious downgrade in every way. Nintendo save me, you son of a bitch. The Super Nintendo game boxes were horizontal. Good. All SNES games had this large border around the box with just a ton of shapes that make sense. Here's a triangle, here's some squares, 16 dots. Sure, that's a cute reference to the Super Nintendo being 16 bits, but why this way? We also have the Super Nintendo logo that was barely used over here. It's supposed to represent the 4 face buttons, but this thing was so much more prominent in Europe and Japan. The SNES box template is iconic, but actually critically looking at it, man, this is odd. You have this giant slab of square covering up part of the artwork just to give some BS tagline. I like the look of it overall, like you know this is a Super Nintendo game, but it feels a lot more abstract than something like the Game Boy or Genesis's offerings. It feels like so much real estate is being taken up by just pure black and no artwork when they could have just had the Super Nintendo logo and that's it. Not to mention, they're still cardboard, which made them prime candidates to be trash. Now over in Europe, the boxes were far simpler, except they needed to make 100% sure Europeans knew this was the PAL version of the Super Nintendo games. Do you think they know where they live? And over in Japan, the Super Famicom boxes were, oddly enough, in a vertical orientation and had far more space to let the art flourish. Just a logo or two denoting it's a Super Famicom game. No where racing becomes an adventure anywhere in sight. But taking a look at the cartridges, these are terrible. European and Japanese games for the Super Nintendo and Super Famicom had no end labels, so putting them on a shelf, only God knows what these are. Thankfully, North American cartridges have end labels, and I've gone half a sentence without bitching, that won't do. I am not a fan of how small these labels are and the colors they chose for them. Nearly all Super Nintendo games have black labels with dark colored fonts. Couple that with how small these things are, and it's honestly really hard to read these things from only a small length away. Compare that to the NES games. All these labels are incredibly easy to read and they're the perfect size. I will gladly take the most likely to be the first person to bitch about the SNES End Labels award, thank you. Game Gear. Well, you got this Master System-like design, then a staircase design, and then you got this Genesis-like one, and that's all I'm willing to say about the Game Gear. What the hell is this, 3DO? Why is this packaging 3 times taller than a regular CD case? They don't even take advantage of the fact this thing is county size. The 3DO logo is just this tiny thing in the corner. They stacked a manual above the disc for no reason. At least you'll know 100% this is a 3DO game. If the sun is blocked, well, you know what Target started selling. Now, this is just one form of 3DO packaging. There was another where the game would come in a standard CD jewel case inside a box the size of this thing. What is this? Oh, yeah, fucking pointless. Game companies believed they had to make their packaging as large as possible to attract customers, especially over here in North America. So when games started appearing on CDs, they had to overcompensate. Discs. You ever have older people say to you, man, nobody uses these things anymore. Why, somebody your age probably doesn't even remember this. I'm 12, not 8. The Sega CD add-on for the Sega Genesis used these piles of human garbage, and they aren't even people, which is impressive. So these cases are kinda cool, but they feel so fragile. They're so big with not much inside to really keep it all together if you drop it or something. Sure, standard CD cases are sort of fragile too, but at least they're easy to replace. Who has 4 of these in their car at all times? The design here is very much supposed to replicate the red Genesis boxes, except this time being blue. They still do have that annoying thing where the Sega CD logo is off-centered on a few games, and not all of them use this casing. Earlier titles used cardboard boxes with a standard-sized jewel case inside. What? If Sega was so forward-thinking with the plastic cases for cartridges, why did they use cardboard boxes for CDs? I mean, sure, they came in a jewel case inside, but still. And then when Sega decided to actually use these bulky-ass fragile cases for Sega CD games, why did they decide to shift back over to cardboard for Genesis? And when they released the 32X add-on, why did they only use cardboard for that? I mean, again, the design here is just like the other ones, except yellow, but why was the Doom box the only one to print the 32X logo upside down? The cartridges are terrible. I mean, they look edible and they have no end labels. That makes it even more confusing as to why they went with cardboard boxes for 32X. I mean, with Genesis, I'd say most people kept their cases because they were hard plastic and those you could just put on the shelf like a book, being able to see which game is which by the spines. If anything, the Genesis games didn't need end labels because you had the cases, but now that you have these containers most people just threw away, that's when you don't use end labels? When people are more likely to have the cartridge and nothing else? But yeah, the Sega CD cases. Boo. They aren't terrible, but I always feel like they're about to fall apart. I do like using the cover art as a manual. That's incredibly resourceful and something CD-based games would usually do all the time. Overseas, the Sega CD, or Mega CD over there, use standard CD-sized cases, which is what makes the most sense. But making sense doesn't make sense in the video game industry now, does it? Even the PlayStation started things off weirdly. The initial batch of games would come in long boxes. Either they were the exact same thing as the Sega CD cases, or they were this weird plastic case with the artwork glued on top. And the spines. Why is the word PlayStation in this direction? Now, they did end up updating things to just standard jewel cases, and these are just so much more logical. You can easily replace the cases, the design is incredibly simple, but it looks nice. And over in Japan, they had the logo in any corner they pleased, and in Europe, they put the banner on the bottom and made the cases buff as shit. I mean, the PlayStation box art sort of ripped off the original Game Boy box art, but everything comes together quite well here, in my opinion. And the Sega Saturn's just off there doing its thing. Yup, the exact same case was used as the Sega CD. Still overly large, still pretty fragile. I mean, these are kinda cool, but I'm looking at these from a practicality point of view, and there is none. The Sega Saturn case designs are white with a logo that looks like it was made in KidPix 3D. It really does show how they were trying to push how the Sega Saturn is 3D, guys, we swear. It's not bad looking, though it's obviously aged more than the PlayStation packaging design and even the Sega CDs. And it especially looks outdated when we compare it to the Japanese Sega Saturn cases. Standard jewel cases, classy logo, it's got it all. The European style is most similar to the North American packaging, though they went for a black aesthetic. Isn't it odd to see how things change like this between regions for seemingly no reason? Especially the cases. Now, I may not be fond of the long-form clear plastic ones, but they are gods compared to what Europe got. Cheap plastic that barely held anything, let alone air. At that rate, I would have almost preferred going back to simple cardboard boxes. I said almost. The Nintendo 64 was still using disposable packaging, showing how even when it was an innovative console, in many regards, it was stuck in the past. These are very similar to the Super Nintendo's boxes, same dimensions and everything, though the new design is more colorful and less obtrusive. Way more room for the art, and I do like how most games have differently colored sides, representing the colors of the N64 logo. Of course, Nintendo was getting antsy to tell everybody what was only available on their platforms at the time. This started on the Super Nintendo with this giant magma leak, and with this fucking disgusting font on Super Metroid's box. Here on 64, it's just a simple curl of a page, which is cute. But when we take out the cartridge, why is this even a problem? Why did they get rid of the end labels? The differences between regions on N64 are similar to that of the Super Nintendo. Europe has a larger border and weirdly makes it look like they took most of the North American art, shrunk it, and put another border around it. Okay. And like the Super Famicom, the N64's Japanese box art was vertically oriented with a small N64 logo in the corner. See, that's what's weird. Either the box art template is huge because they just didn't trust consumers having problem-solving skills, or it's so small it's nearly non-existent. Take, for example, the Nintendo 64's disk drive add-on, the 64DD. These games are in proprietary jewel case-like packaging, and what denotes them as 64DD exclusives is a spot the difference. No wonder now when games on specific versions of consoles are released, they have to make 10,000% sure people know the difference. Virtual Boy! What do you want me to say? The North American boxes are weird. I guess the background's supposed to represent retinas. It's all red and blue and the game cartridges all use the same background art and have this very specific dust cover. The Japanese ones, for some reason, replicate the North American Game Boy style packaging. Was not expecting that. Let's retaliate by not discussing any further. The Game Boy Color packaging was pretty much a repeat of the original Game Boys, except this time doing the whole Sega Saturn thing of using KidPix. Other than that, They're the same thing, except of course in Japan where they ripped off the PlayStation 1 box art. See, it's all coming full circle. The Dreamcast was an odd one. Of course, standard CD cases, but the design of the boxes, we have some with a white curve and a triangle representing the look of the Dreamcast console itself, with the Sega Dreamcast logo as far as humanly left as it could be. Then we have these black ones. No triangle, smaller curve, and these ones have the Dreamcast logo on the curve itself. I believe the black cases came to be the standard later in the system's life. I initially thought a black game represented that this game is for far more mature audiences, and then I saw Chicken Run had it and reacted accordingly. Remember these double pack cases? PS1 had these as well. They were always for games with more than one disc, and for some reason they decided to give the game 2 spines. I mean, at least this way it blends into your collection quite well instead of just having a thicker case. But I don't have 2 Shenmues, damn it. Practicality wise, these are terrible. Both of the Dreamcast box art designs are pretty alright, though I would have preferred if they took one or the other and not switch over to black halfway through. And for some reason, I just always feel weird when the templates use a very strong curve like this. It just feels like it cuts off more of the art this way, I guess. In Europe, oh my god, what system is this for? Not only do we have the Dreamcast logo on the left, but also taking up 90% of the top. In Japan, Dreamcast games were the size of North American ones, but came with these paper covers for the spines. Great. That's kind of cool. It makes you feel like these are more premium, but makes it far easier for a Japanese Dreamcast game to be incomplete when you buy one. You have to sound like an idiot telling the seller, well, I'm not buying it without the spine hat. It's completely pointless. Japanese Sega Saturn games had these as well, and they just make it more difficult to keep your games 100% all together. There's a simple little Dreamcast logo in the corner, which is something I'm sure you've noticed Japanese games do a lot. Just a simple logo in the corner. Nothing crazy, they respect your intelligence. Overseas? Do you think they get it? PlayStation 2 games. I never really cared for how these looked. Now, functionally, they're fine. They get the job done perfectly. I just always felt they looked really cheap. I don't really care for how the spines look. That white box for the PlayStation logo looks like they went on Google Images, thought the image was transparent, and went, whoops, f it. They basically took the standard PlayStation box, turned it into a DVD case, brought the logo to the top, called it a day. They do have a spot for the memory cards, which is nice. I never use this. Outside of that holster, these are pretty much just standard DVD cases. Makes it really easy to replace these things, while also making them feel sort of cheap and generic. Well, at least Europe has our back. But do they, though? The PlayStation 2 logo here is bigger for some reason. Is there really a reason for it to be this way? Was this box just not clear enough that it was for PlayStation 2? It's not even bigger by an obvious amount. So why is it bigger in the first place? And the entire case is blue. Of course it is. I mean, blue is kind of part of the PS2's brand. The original box was blue, and that's it. But is that really a good reason to go with a blue box? This matches nothing, and why do the spines look like this? It looks unfinished. And all European PlayStation 2 games are like this. Now, I do enjoy consistency with spines, but I like it when the consistency remains consistent with the brand. What are they trying to say with this? Why is the case blue, the logo bigger, and the spine white with bold Arial text? And then for the budget re-releases, I mean, I already have a problem with those, but for the PlayStation 2 in Europe, oh my god. So now the case is silver, the logo's silver, spine is black with silver text. Now, this looks better than the standard cases, but I'm still appalled how it looks next to a standard game. In Japan, they followed the format of the North American games, thankfully, though for their budget releases, they changed the out of the colors for some reason. Gold, yellow with silver cases. Can you believe these are all for the same console? Game Boy Advance followed a very similar format to previous Game Boy box art, though Japan's take was more like miniature Super Nintendo boxes. Here overseas, cardboard, label on the left, the sides of the box just have the game's logo. This time the banner is rounded and almost looks like stainless steel, and one thing I always found peculiar about these boxes is the only for triangle, denoting that this is an exclusive game you can only play on Game Boy Advance. That's good to know, and lots of systems have that on their games. The thing is, pretty much every Game Boy Advance game said this. Games that also released on consoles still said only for Game Boy Advance. Why? I assume because in terms of handheld versions of said game, yeah, it was the only one. That's why for games that also released on the N-Gage, they couldn't say only for. Let's talk about that, f it, I have time. The N-Gage was Nokia's cell phone handheld game console hybrid. You could use it as a phone, but why would you do that when you could play games on it? But why would you do that when you could use it as a phone? I should just stop doing. The games came in... Oh my god, a plastic case for handheld games? This is incredible. It's a nice size, protects the game quite well. I think using a plastic case for your games really does wonders to making it feel more premium. It feels like an actual game, while in comparison, Game Boy Advance games felt like a cheap thrill. Just throw away the packaging like a toothbrush, who cares? It has an interesting banner design on the front and spine. The silver case looks nice, and on the inside, there is so much room for activities. 2 slots for games, and it comes with a carrying case that holds 4 more games. Why did they do this? I have no idea. I mean, 2 slots, that makes sense, but including a whole ass carrying case for 4 more games? Why not just 4 more game card slots? Whatever. The big problem though is the game card holder. It is so tight, you just can't pop the game out. If I do, then I almost feel like I'm gonna snap the card in half. No, you have to pull these things apart with 2 fingers and then use a 3rd finger to wiggle the game out. This is a 3-finger job. Now moving on to the GameCube. Fellas, I think I found it. I think this is my favorite video game packaging of all time. It's perfect. So first up, this game case as a whole, rock solid. So many other cases I come across are cracked and have pieces missing. They're basically falling apart. Hell, brand new games that just released, half the time when I open up the package, there's like a solid 60% chance there's gonna be broken plastic in the box. The disc spindle is broken, the manual holder is out of commission. It's a mess. Game boxes nowadays are so cheap, but the GameCubes, I have yet to find a single box that's broken like that. The banner is so nice looking, so sleek and cool. Sure, it is curved, but it isn't like the Dreamcast, which is basically half a damn circle. This is very subdued, a slight curve. I don't feel like it's in the way of any of the art, and if it's an exclusive, the only 4 label is the same as the Game Boy Advances. It's not obtrusive, it looks good, I love it. And then we go to the spine. Why is the GameCube logo on the bottom? An interesting choice for sure. I mean, pretty much every game box I know of has the console's logo on the top, but I'm okay with this change. It's probably because I grew up with the GameCube and I'm used to it, but it doesn't look out of place and is kind of a cool change of pace. But hey, if you prefer your console's logo on the top of the spine, just move to Europe. This looks wrong to me. But then if we look at the Japanese GameCube boxes, man, they were living a completely different life from us. These boxes are tiny. They just have a simple GameCube logo in the corner. There's this slip cover over a translucent case. I mean, no matter what, these things, at the very least, are neat. And hey, we got a taste of them over here. The Game Boy player adapter needed a disc to boot up, and that disc came in a Japanese GameCube box, no matter what region you were in. These things are cool, but they're just not as functional as the boxes overseas. The slipcover is the only way you're getting the full cover art, both front and back covers, as well as spines telling you what the hell you're playing. Without the slipcover, the manual is here to represent the cover art, but it's behind this super foggy plastic. And obviously this cardboard sleeve is gonna be more susceptible to wear and tear over the years and is more easily losable. While this is neat, I do feel like there were more efficient ways to go about this smaller packaging. That's right, Scott bitched about the Japanese GameCube boxes. Nothing's off limit. The original Xbox, just pure Mountain Dew green cases. It's pretty loud, but it fits with the image of Xbox. It's not like a blue case with a large banner and a white spine. I have been furious for the past 20 years. I think the Xbox boxes are what I would have preferred the PS2 boxes to look like. It has personality without being too loud and obnoxious while being functional as all hell. Though I find it odd that on the spine, if the game has Xbox Live Online support, they felt the need to label it as such on the spine. On the front cover, sure, I get that, but why the spine? Thankfully, when the Nintendo DS hit the scene, Nintendo wised up and gave us plastic cases for their handheld games, and this was a big deal to me. This made the DS feel like a home console on the go. Not only did it launch with Super Mario 64, but the games came in DVD-like cases, just like home consoles. And not only that, it had a power button. Not some power switch, it had a button just like home consoles. That was honestly a really cool thing to me back then. Take it. Cheers. These boxes are great though. It's interesting Nintendo basically reused the exact same format from the Game Boy Advance boxes, except this time making it white. There's also this ridge thing, so there you have it. Regardless, the DS library was consistent as consistency throughout the years. You put every DS game next to each other and they all look so in line, so perfect. Unless you bought some European games. Japan's boxes were the exact same as ours. Europe fills an entire room. Look at this, why are these so big? The front template's the exact same, the contents inside are the exact same. Why are these boxes 1.5 times bigger than the rest of them? I mean, the translucent style is cool. The side is entirely white with this little triangle at the bottom, which apparently indicates which PAL region this is from exactly. These aren't bad boxes on their own. I just have no idea why they chunked. And of course, the redesigned Nintendo DSi had its own boxes for exclusive games. Who doesn't know that? Yeah, there were only 6 Nintendo DSi retail games. Some games that had specific DSi features made the hell sure you knew on the box, but these games were only playable on the DSi. These are basically the same cases, though some are white and some are black. The DSi banner is actually just a flat square now. Still a ridge, wouldn't be a DS game without the ridge. And the game card itself is a lighter color. Oh, and the spine. Why did they do that? Why instead of a DSi logo did they just do the 2 squares? That just looks stupid. Guys, the DSi boxes are stupid. Karma doesn't exist. F these boxes. Well, Sony entered the portable market with the PSP, so obviously they couldn't use cardboard boxes. They didn't want to look like fucking idiots next to Nintendo. They changed to spine. The PSP boxes are small, thin, and translucent. It shares many elements with the PlayStation 2's box, which makes sense as when the PSP came out, the PS2 was totally relevant. That's something you see a lot. If a company makes a home console and a handheld, many times they'll try to create parity between the box art designs. Doesn't explain why they put a game controller on the banner. It's probably because they released physical movies for the system, UMD video for PSP. Pretty much, this is silver, this is not. That's your way to distinguish what's a movie and what's a game. I mean, it makes sense. You don't want to buy Spider-Man 2 when you meant to buy Spider-Man 2. Halfway through the PSP's life, they changed up the box style. This is way more in line with how later PS3 games looked, but for some reason they decided to cut the banner on the spine in half. I'm all for freeing up space for the art, though I don't like it when they do that halfway through a game system's life, and thus now my PSP games look weird next to each other. Was that really a request from the PSP fandom? More spine? Changing up the box art template was a major problem during this time. Look no further than the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3. The 360 easily was the least offensive of the two. Most 360 games look pretty alright next to each other, but it's just the little things that stick out. The initial run of 360 games had see-through green cases, and this design with some thin green stripes. We see this on the banner and on the spine. Then around 2010, they introduced this new design featuring a large green strip on the banner and a fully white background for the logo on the spine. Of course, if it was a game that required Kinect, we got a purple case and the banner changed slightly, but the spine looks the same. And then around 2013, we have this new one, where the Xbox symbol is slightly different. How dare they? As time went on, they cheaped out with the cases. What once was translucent is now something that's a bit more in line with the original Xbox cases. Also, for games that used multiple discs, if they're just trying to cut costs, they don't even include a flap or something. They do this thing where they just stack the discs. But that wasn't as offensive as when they made 3 games you could only get at Burger King. They worked on the original Xbox and Xbox 360, so they gave them Xbox 360 cases but just said Xbox on them. Remember this. The PlayStation 3 had fun life. We got 3 different types of box art. This is my hell. So they kind of went back to the PS1 style with this template, the banner on the side. It's not great. This original logo reeks of Spider-Man. It is the Spider-Man font after all. The spine is odd as it's red and the PS3 logo is oriented like this, but hey, look at this case. These are a bit annoying as they are completely proprietary to the PlayStation 3. You can't use DVD cases or even Blu-ray cases because these covers won't fit. But the cases do look cool, and the revised PS3 art later on, I think, looks far better. It makes the PS3 games look classy and sophisticated. The Xbox 360 games look like a drink flavor at Taco Bell. Nothing wrong with that, but these just look more premium. But then for some reason they decide to update it again after the PS4 came out. Why? This one has a slightly smaller banner and it's all this bluish color. Okay, I get parity between handhelds and home consoles, but why would you want to make your last generation system look more similar to your current generation one? Don't you want to make it crystal clear which games are for what system? Why would you want to make it more similar like this? This obviously didn't work out, as only a few PS3 games featured this style. They did go back to the second revision. God, my year is saved. But there was one more style of PS3 game that was pretty eye-grittingly annoying. PlayStation Move titles. If a game had PlayStation Move support in some way, not even requiring it, just if it had it as an option, there's this giant PlayStation Move bubble on the front and on the spine. This just looks dumb. Again, just like the original Xbox stuff. I get it being on the front, albeit it's very large, but why the spine? Now the Wii. The Wii. How I love this system's box art style. The fully white design, white case, and the white spine. The banner is so unique, but it works. I love this template. Why did some companies f it up? I mean, when it's a cute big event like New Super Mario Bros. Wii, that was neat to have this fully red box. It sticks out, but kind of in a fun way. When pretty much all of LucasArts titles have a yellow spine for no reason, that's when I've had enough! There are a few games that like to make their spines different for whatever reason. NBA Jam, Twilight Scene, the Two Horsemen of the Apocalypse. But for the vast majority of the Wii library, This looks nice. And then Resident Evil Darkside Chronicles forgot the Wii logo on its spine, but just don't buy it and you won't have that issue. Also, there were the console pack-in games that came bundled in with Wii systems. These were annoyingly in cardboard sleeves. Thankfully, most got full-blown releases in plastic cases, but Link's crossbow training was f***ed from day one. Other regions were pretty much the same, but in Japan they started giving games aimed towards older players black boxes because sure. The 3DS had very similar style boxes, fully white with a white spine. They differentiated these from DS boxes by, get this, moving the logo to the right. It's not rounded anymore either. These are completely different, are they not? The boxes are also a bit thinner than normal DS boxes, especially if they're from Europe. You could fit a boat in this. I really do like these ones, though the spines, well, they're fine. I don't like how Nintendo constantly flip-flopped between generic fonts and actual logos. It's just weird how some games have just words and others have the actual logos. Now later on, Nintendo released the new 3DS, being slightly more powerful. Some games were exclusive to this model, so they needed their own packaging. I have been waiting for this day for years. It's time to bitch about the new 3DS box art. So, basically, Nintendo's idea of not confusing consumers is to cover a new side of a square they haven't been to yet. We got left, right? Let's go for the top. These boxes look so awkward. Like, the banner is a bit bigger on an already small box, so the artwork looks claustrophobic. And you know, with how much video game companies love effing with the spines of their boxes for no reason, it surprises me how similar new 3DS games look to regular ones. And most 3DS games have this little disclaimer on the box, plays in 2D and 3D, some games only play in 2D. Weirdly enough, not all boxes have this disclaimer. And it's not even random third-party games that don't have it. Some Nintendo-published stuff doesn't have it either. The spines of these boxes have this cute little icon, which I like. Pop the game in the system, and that's the icon on the menu. Oh, that's a dumb attention to detail I enjoy. Now, I'm not a fan of when the icon is just the game's actual logo with its title. It just seems kind of redundant when the title and logo is already on the spine. These may not be perfect boxes, I do have some quarrels with them, but they're pretty good. Until 2017. Oh boy, okay, so 2017 was when the Nintendo Switch launched and Nintendo changed up their branding. They changed to a white Nintendo logo on a red background. A little weird that this is the official logo officially. They decided to change how their published games look on 3DS around then, and every Nintendo published game on 3DS after the Nintendo Switch launched had the mark of the beast. What the hell is this? Who thought this looked good? Not only does this clash with the all-white spines, but it looks weird next to any other 3DS game, especially old Nintendo published ones. Nintendo would always put their logo down here horizontally. Now it's vertical and covered in red. And they made a lot of 3DS games that looked like this. My 3DS library looked pretty great up until when Nintendo started to do this, and my entire life was fine until Nintendo started to do this. The Wii U library. Okay. This is my bread and butter. This is a fun one. Wii U games combine the Wii, GameCube, 3DS, and whatever other shapes were in Nintendo's mind at the time. So the front, okay, thanks. This is the same as the GameCube template. It's the exact same. I love the GameCube art, but not because it's blue and yellow, because it's not. I remember cheap fan-made Wii U box art renders that were literally just the Wii template but flipped around. I think the official Darksiders 2 Amazon page used that for a second even. But then this was revealed when Assassin's Creed 3 blew its load and updated its store page with this box art, and man, I've never been the same since. So I'm fine with the blue and white look, but why a yellow trim? Why not make that trim white or make the header white and make the trim blue? Why this? The Wii U disc art has a header that looks like this. Why doesn't the box do this too? And why mimic the GameCube's box art design? Bless the GameCube's heart, but it was one of Nintendo's worst performing consoles at the time. So what do? You replicate its box art? I'm not saying this is why the Wii U failed, but they were kind of asking for it at this point. The spine has a ridge from the header extend over, which is cute, but it looks kind of off when you have a bunch of Wii U games together. Especially since a lot of the covers aren't going to be 100% aligned perfectly. You know, they shift around a bit in that case. So games will always look off-centered when a bunch are on the shelf. The same icon style from the 3DS is used, and the actual game titles, I have the exact same problem I did with 3DS games. And then a few games had some odd quirks. Now, similar to the Wii, in Japan, more mature-oriented titles were given a black case with a darker Wii U logo. For some reason, here in North America, 2 Wii U games used a black spine and nothing more, Resident Evil Revelations and Deus Ex Human Revolution. No other games did this. They're both from different publishers, and while they're both mature-rated games, they weren't the first or last mature games on Wii U. So what, did they want to do something like what they did in Japan and give mature games a black case but gave up after these games? Or did both of these games randomly want to use a black spine for no reason? Star Fox Xbox Guard has a cream-colored spine. I haven't graduated yet because I can't finish this essay. New Super Luigi U has a green case with green Wii U artwork and much like New Super Mario Bros. Wii, I'm cool with this. It's more of a fun little event than an annoyance. But then Wii Sports Club forgot the blue ridge at the top. That is the definition of not a fun little event. European Wii U games had a blue spine, but it was white where the Wii U logo is. I may have found my least favorite thing. The PS Vita cases. These are adorable. They're so small I question if these things should even exist. I love when we get custom-sized boxes like this. Seriously, you don't see plastic cases the size of this for anything else. It's great. We have a blue-styled banner and spine. Very basic, but effective. And this was what would eventually be the standard for the PlayStation 4. These are pretty good-looking boxes, I'm not gonna lie. Very basic, but they didn't change it up too much. It just looks good when a bunch of PS4 games are together. There is this big PlayStation VR logo on the spine if the game supports PSVR. It not even requires it, much like PlayStation Move games on PS3. Why does this need to be on the spine? And why do some games that even heavily use the PSVR not have this sometimes? The initial releases of Resident Evil 7 didn't have this on the spine, but it did on the cover. Also, another complaint, PS4 game cases are disappointingly fragile. I've seen so many with chunks taken out of the sides, it's really lame. But you know what isn't really lame? The Xbox One cases. I have officially lied once today. So the concept of these are pretty neat. Let's make the banner a part of the actual case. Much like the PS3 cases, this makes it much harder to just buy cheap replacement cases, but they do look kind of cool. My problem with them though, the fact the logo is painted on means it's more likely the banner is gonna look slightly off. It may not be colored properly, the paint may chip off. It's a cool idea to have the banner not be a part of the artwork, but it doesn't really affect things much, especially when they end up putting an Xbox One banner on the bottom of some games anyway, so I don't really understand the reason for either one of these things at this point. The spine is fully gray with a logo, sure. And why is the disc on the left side of the packaging? How have we never gotten answers for this? Microsoft's done tons of different things with the Xbox One cases, mainly different styles of telling people why they should buy an Xbox One, but also re-releasing Xbox 360 games that are backwards compatible with the Xbox One. So many 360 games got re-released in Xbox One-like cases, but these aren't specifically Xbox One cases, they're Xbox cases, like from Burger King. These are simply 360 games. They aren't remastered versions on an Xbox One disc. They'll still work on a normal 360, but also play on an Xbox One because they are literally the Xbox 360 discs. They have two logos on the banner, and on the side they just say Xbox. Sometimes the disc says Xbox One and Xbox 360, and other times it's just the original Xbox 360 disc. My thing with these is, where do I put them? Do I put them with the Xbox One games or do I put them with the 360 games? They're literally just 360 games. They just reprinted them with modern Xbox branding. But they initially didn't put all of them in Xbox One cases. Here's Fallout 3, My Eyes. So you're gonna use a 360 sized case but design the packaging to look like an Xbox One's. This fits nothing. You put this with your 360 games, this looks stupid. You put this with your Xbox One games, this looks stupid. They actually re-released this game in the normal Xbox One packaging, which looks way better, and I'll be 100% honest here. These are cool little oddities. Like, these may not be remastered Xbox 360 games for the Xbox One, but it's still cool to see them in an Xbox One style case. But I feel this packaging may be a bit misleading, and many may assume these are remastered Xbox One versions of 360 games. I mean, look here, Rayman Legends released for Xbox One, but it also came out on 360. So they decided to re-release Rayman Legends for 360 in an Xbox One case. The 360 version runs on Xbox One, but it's officially not the Xbox One version. Confused? These are different versions. I like some of the ideas with the Xbox One cases, but overall, this is a mess. Well, we've officially trudged over to the Nintendo Switch. These boxes are so neat. They're like the PSP boxes, but thinner and beet red. It seems that Nintendo has finally taken the Japanese template style of a simple logo in the corner and standardized it across all regions. It may not be the most exciting, but it's easy to identify. It fits the rest of the Switch branding, and it leaves more room for the art to stretch its legs. The spines are completely red, with a small Switch logo, standardized font, and the name of the publisher. I like these. However, everything being red and having the same font makes it harder to identify certain games from far away. Like with the PS4, it's pretty easy from this distance to see which games are which. The Switch, you almost need to be right next to them. I can appreciate the consistency, but being too consistent does make things harder to distinguish. As cool as a bunch of Switch games look together, I still prefer the PS4 style personally. Also, that standardized font apparently isn't a requirement. A small handful of publishers use their own logo or font, and my god is it putrid. Come on guys, just use the standard Switch font. Why does Super Bomberman R and Binding of Isaac need to use their own dumb font? Why did Battle for Bikini Bottom use a different font? It's not even SpongeBob related. They just used a different font to use a different font. That takes more work. If you're gonna do this, at least go out with a bang like the other ones I showed. This is just a generic font. Why not just use the regular Switch font? Nintendo Labo games have black spines, which I'm fine with. They're such unique titles in the library. I think it's cool to separate them like this. And European games are pretty much the same, but the title on the spine is centered and uses a different font, because Europe wouldn't be the same without that. Now the PlayStation 5 packaging is stupid. I've become more accepting of it over time, but it feels weak. It's the same as the PS4's, but with a white banner instead. It uses a blue case, which I get why. The PS5 is white with a blue light, but I think it would have looked better to make it a fully white case or a black case or a clear plastic case and then represent the blue by making that the color of the line at the bottom of the banner. It works, but using a blue case feels like they're just using old PS4 game case stock, and the overall design, I'm just not crazy about it. And the Xbox cases look the damn same. They just say Xbox now, woo. Oh! I finally shut off my hospital gown. I'm cured! And all it took was doing dear god anything but playing video games. The box art template and game packaging as a whole is just flat out interesting to me. And while I went on and even on about how consistency is key here, it's almost beautiful how consistently inconsistent these things are. It keeps things interesting, and if everything was perfect, well, I don't know what I would have done for the past 45 minutes. But spending your time wisely is important, and apparently doing this was all for the better of society. Karma does exist, and it cured me by talking about game packaging. So apparently, it loves when you talk about game packaging. As long as you don't talk shit on the DSi boxes.
Hey y'all, Scott here, and welcome marketing rats. This is Marketing 101, the 101st edition of our marketing tutorials. Today I'm going to show you how to successfully market that Nintendo GameCube game that you're selling in 2018. Market it. Thanks for learning the ins and outs of marketing with me today. If you choose to purchase our next video release, I'll show you how to put a down payment on a house with just your signature on this piece of paper.
Yeah, I was in the video and even following the directions. I don't know why, I came out with bread. Mankind has achieved a multitude of amazing things, putting a man on the moon, the Great Pyramids, the continuous evolution of the sciences, but for some reason they made player's choice f***ing yellow, so might as well start over. Listen man, I do dig a hearty video game from time to time, and a good portion of that dig ratio is definitely playing said hearty video game. But once you're done playing it and put it back on the shelf, that's how it'll look for the majority of your life, sitting there, mainly serving as a conversation piece or incredibly expensive decor until you decide to pop it back in again. So I usually really do care on how the spine of a video game looks. I mean, I never won't buy a game because the spine is screech-inducing, but whenever I pick up a new title, the spine is one of the first things to look at because, well, that's how it'll look like when it's on my shelf. And let me tell you, I can't get enough of that darn consistency. If a video game library's boxes all line up with each other, oh boy, there's truly no other feeling like it. I know, I've talked scoliosis enough in the past. I'll make this little spine tangent as brief as I can possibly make a spine tangent. Take the PS4 games for example. They all have the same PS4 headers followed by a custom spine featuring the game logo and art. The fact that they all have their own custom art and logos with the same PS4 header, wow. Similar situation with the Wii, most game boxes are all white with the custom game logos. They just look really nice altogether. Yeah, some games have custom colored boxes like New Super Mario Bros. Wii's red one and Mario and Sonic at the London 2012 Olympic Games' yellow one, and while I would have preferred these boxes to be white like the rest, I can live with these. They're so infrequent that they mainly feel like special games, the picks of the litter, cool things to make them stand out from the rest. Now if 20% of the Wii library had a red case, that's when it would get a little on the too far side of things. When a good chunk of a game console's library has one specific design compared to the rest, the world's flippin' pissometers all collectively burst. The first half of the PS3's life had spines like these, and then they decided to switch the logo to something completely different. I do prefer the second logo, but man, if you alphabetize your games like I do, you just buy yourself a ticket to inconsistency jungle, an attraction that's borderline irritating. The Wii U's spines, however, were deservingly absent from the nominations at the Spinies years 2012 through 2017. They obviously tried to make them all consistent, but all it did was irk. They continually kept on flip-flopping between stock generic fonts and actual game logos. Like, why does Mario Tennis Ultra Smash, Star Fox Zero, and Game & Wario have their own logos, but then Splatoon, Captain Toad Treasure Tracker, and New Super Mario Bros. U have this generic font? Then they allowed Capcom and Square Square Enix to make one game each with a black spine for some reason, and then they made Star Fox Guard's box have this eggnog stain of a color. Nintendo even forgot to add the blue ridge on the top of the Wii Sports Club box. I do prefer having colorful spines that feature art from the game and the game's logo, but if a game console library's spines are one way, game publishers, please follow in everybody else's footsteps. The Nintendo Switch library sees the majority of games use the same font on a red background, and while that doesn't leave a lot of room for creativity, it looks nice on a shelf. Except we have troublemakers in the form of Super Bomberman R. God, what is this? Not only is the title centered instead of left aligned like every other Switch game, but why is Konami's logo like this? Why? Overall, I like some consistency in my game boxes. Is it OCD? Well, as somebody who unknowingly has OCD would say, I don't know. So please take this into consideration when I paint this picture in your head. Popular must-have games reprinted for low, low prices. I don't know about you, but I had myself at so please take this into consideration. But there's a catch. This thing looks miserable. This isn't a game, it's what people hold up in mugshots. Player's Choice, Greatest Hits, Platinum Hits, Nintendo Select, Sega All-Stars, they go by many names but serve one purpose: to muck up anybody's up-and-coming game collection and turn them into something foul. That's a nice looking GameCube library you have there. Holy shit, I made a huge mistake making that observation. The concept of these re-releases is great, being hit games at a price where they're practically giving them away. But they all mess it up hard by ruining the packaging with different colors, graphics, designs, whatever. They stick out like a sore thumb. Since these were re-releases, these are the most current prints of these games, meaning a lot of the time they're everywhere. They're the easiest to find, and every single major game company had their own line of these re-releases, and they all made sure they were eyesores for some reason. And the terminal illness started with Sega Classics on the Sega Genesis. Sega Classics aren't super awful, mainly because the Genesis games themselves don't follow a strict format. While many have the black grid or the red design, many don't at all and have their own custom one. It always felt weird to me that you were supposed to keep the Genesis cases due to their hard plastic, yet there was so much variation in the box art layout. While the SNES boxes were all incredibly unified in terms of design, yet Nintendo didn't expect you to put them on a shelf and keep them. They were just cardboard boxes. They were born to be thrown away. Speaking of which, the Super Nintendo and Game Boy were the first appearances of the term Player's Choice. Making amazing games like Super Mario All-Stars, A Link to the Past, and Super Metroid a measly $20 is awesome. And the way they went about these re-releases on the SNES was tolerable in my opinion. The cartridges now have a Player's Choice ribbon graphic on them, and the line on the label changed from red to golden. Not a big issue in my opinion. I mean, A Link to the Past re-release is uproariously apparent you have the re-release, but the majority of Player's Choice on SNES ain't that bad. The same goes for N64. Nintendo did a very similar thing with these re-releases, just popping a ribbon graphic on them. If I could choose, I would definitely pick up the original copies, but in my opinion, if you have the Player's Choice copies of SNES and N64 games, I won't completely disregard you. Now Game Boy is where we start to get fucky. God, these boxes looked hard. Literally, they couldn't just stop at a ribbon graphic. They had to change the entire Game Boy logo. Thankfully, the cartridge itself only has the ribbon on it, but was this really necessary? However, Nintendo decided that wasn't enough and decided to go full-on sociopath with Player's Choice on GameCube. This is horrendous, replacing the black labels with yellow ones. The front box art and spine are affected here. It could have been worse. But come on, they could have chosen any other color. They chose yellow. The only thing I can think of for the reasoning behind the hard color change is that Nintendo believed that consumers would be attracted to the yellow, as it would yell to them saying, hey, I'm a best-selling game at a crazy low price. The thing is, I don't think any consumer knew why these games were yellow, and I think if anybody had an option, they'd go with the black GameCube games because that fits snugly with the rest of their collection. Also, from what I've heard, games can't yell. It's like Nintendo has a mentality, when a consumer sees a Player's Choice title, they know they're in for gallons of joy at a price to die for. No! Nobody thinks that! Just the fact that these games are at a low price should be enough to grab a consumer's attention. Why'd they have to smear yellow all over the place? And at that point, why not just add a graphic to the front cover and call it a day? Why the spine, which nobody would see in most retailers? Why does it have to be obliterated in this process? The Game Boy Advance had the right idea. It had the same Player's Choice graphic, but it was only on the front cover and nowhere else, not on the spine of the box. And even then, most people threw the GBA boxes away, so with these things, I would have been more than okay with the disease spreading to the spine. But nope, they had to put it on their home console with cases people actually kept. Even though I hate the yellow Player's Choice label with a passion, I'm still stuck wondering who got it worse, the US or Europe? Huh. Nintendo moved on from Player's Choice and now refers to their budget gaming line as Nintendo Select, starting with the Wii and continuing on with the 3DS and Wii U. These, I'm way more into. The spines only have a small medallion on the bottom, and that's cool with me. It's not jarring, and many games have a graphic on the bottom like this anyway, so it doesn't stick out hard. I mean, if I have the option, I'd definitely trade these out for the original prints, but I don't have a problem sleeping at night with these games in my collection. Japan never got Nintendo Selects or even Player's Choice. Instead, they have the Happy Price selection for the 3DS, which, hey, if you want to feel like you're buying a puppet show instead of a game, the Happy Price selection has you covered. The Nintendo DS never had a Nintendo-managed budget software lineup, but that didn't stop Konami from re-releasing their own games under their own ulcer of packaging. This is the kind of box art that raises more questions than answers. The disease spreads further. Sony is just as guilty with these types of packaging. PlayStation uses the moniker Greatest Hits, and the PS1 had this ooze onto the front cover. Honestly, this isn't my least favorite in the world. It's not good by any means, but it looks far nicer than what the PS2 got. Jesus, man, who in their right mind said burgundy? How is this color appealing to anybody below the age of 80? And why is the header now curved? PS3, we have red. Better than the PS2, but still not the greatest in the world because now the case is red too. Speaking of red, Sega had one more crack at the re-releases with the Dreamcast in the form of Sega All-Stars, which are basically less annoying forms of the PS1's greatest hits. But we still have this monstrosity to go over. Xbox's Platinum Hits. Microsoft made sure you damn well knew you had a Platinum Hits copy of a game, as the entirety of the box is coded in this thing. The header, the box art itself has a border, the spine, including where the game logo is. It's just cream to bits. I mean, at least it's silver, which is a pretty conservative and nice looking color. It does clash with the others, but at least it's not yellow compared to black or burgundy compared to black. I don't know, I don't like these at all, but I still have a burning or hatred for Player's Choice and Greatest Hits from that generation. But don't worry everybody, Microsoft redeemed themselves in terms of not pissing me off enough, because let's talk about the Xbox 360 generation, where they had so many different designs for Platinum Hits games, it's hard to keep track of. The first design was this, basically a border around the box art in the spine where the game's logo was changed to be this gray thing. Honestly, not that bad. It doesn't really stick out that much in comparison to other games. Then they change it to this, where Platinum Hits spreads to the header and enlarges the spine's header as well. This one is gross. I hate the fact that the 360 header on the spine is way longer than it needs to be. After this, there were a few Platinum Hits that just had a simple logo on the front cover with nothing else, and my god, this is how you do it. Just a little graphic on the front is fine, it's perfect. After these non-complaints, Microsoft went back to the drawing board and came back with this. What is this? So the header is the same elongated one from before, but now with a gradient from gray to white. I never liked how the text was in white, so it got harder and harder to read against the gradient. But why? Why is the spine white with the most stock generic font imaginable? There's no reason for this. Why does it look this way? Recently, Microsoft has re-released Xbox 360 games that are backwards compatible with the Xbox One in this new packaging that looks like the Xbox One boxes, but absolutely not at the same time. I hate these too. Like, why not put a graphic on the original releases that just says playable on Xbox One? Instead, you have it clash with the rest of your Xbox library no matter what console you have. Have an Xbox 360? Doesn't look right next to the rest of the games. Xbox One? Same thing because it's a standard DVD case compared to the Blu-ray size cases of the Xbox One. There is no reason why these re-releases should stick out this badly. And you know what's even worse? Some games were exclusively released in this packaging. Pikmin 2's Wii release took a while to get here in North America, and when it did, Nintendo slapped a Nintendo Selects border on it. Why? This game was never released in North America. How can it already be a Nintendo Select? Some people go for complete sets of these re-releases, and you know, that must be a fun thing to collect. Good on those people. But for everybody else, if you just wanted to play Super Mario Sunshine and have the Player's Choice copy, it looks janker than jank next to the rest of your games, and it doesn't need to be. They didn't have to change the look of the spines, they didn't have to change the color of the cases, they could have just popped a graphic on the front that said bestseller, lower the MSRP, and call it a day. But the fact that they went the extra mile deserves a solid shake of the fist. And thus, it was torn, it being that, because that tears it. I'm gonna form a strongly worded verbal letter to Nintendo about these roadkills of re-releases. Hey, Nintendo! Why'd you have to make Player's Choice so lame?
Well, sir, it was the player's choice.
Oh god. We did this. Hey y'all, Scott here, I got nothing. And when I'm completely bone dry when it comes to ideas, that's when we bust out the idea wheel. Let's see what we have to talk about today. Ah, son of a bitch. Okay, well, I guess I'm talking about the L button today. Holy shit, I have no idea how I got 23 minutes out of that topic. Oh, Jesus Christ. Ha, the physical video game. Look at all this plastic, it's great, right? The box has always been something I've considered one of the simple joys in gaming. Something that doesn't matter in the slightest when it comes to legitimately enjoying a video game, but is something that just sticks with you. I always love just looking at the box, reading the back, seeing all the art. Physical video games are just something that I've always appreciated, and back in the day, that was partially due to the inclusion of this smattering of paper. The video game manual is something I think we only really started talking about until it started to go away. In this digital heavy age, it's easy to look back at all the little things with games we always took for granted, but really miss now that they're basically gone. Stuff like gaming magazines, demo discs, cheat codes. These aren't dead, but they're dead. Tons of my favorite video game related things have been replaced by much more resourceful and easier solutions, all thanks to this home wrecker. It's the internet, home to such things as... Now, is the internet truly a stupid looking garbage man for killing what once were these little joys of video games? I mean, no, are you kidding me? They got chat roulette on this thing. Yeah, magazines were great, but I can get all this info immediately online. Don't lie, as much as you say, man, I miss magazines. If you had the choice between only getting gaming news immediately through the internet or once a month via a magazine... I don't even have to finish that sentence, you already know what you're gonna pick. But I get it, it's the whole joy of having a physical, tangible thing to flip through, to read all this information, see pictures and advertisements for other games. You only get this thing once a month, you better savor it. With the internet literally giving you everything you could possibly want at whim, it's harder to appreciate the smaller things, like some cool formatting on a page in Nintendo Power, or finally finding out that human beings bought Faceball 2000. Damn it, Scott, you may be saying, I thought you were gonna talk about paper, not paper. We got a little off track here, but the point I'm trying to make is, things are way easier now with a lot of physical things moving to digital. The technology has advanced so much that a lot of the physical things we got back in the day are no longer necessary. But it's a bit harder to appreciate them in this form. Gaming magazines are fundamentally dead, but the content they offered isn't. This kind of stuff can all be found online, and it's way more convenient. However, I still miss the feeling of magazines. They just felt so much more special. This sentiment rings true with so many other elements of gaming, with video game manuals being the most obvious one. Buying a new video game was always an exhilarating experience pre-2011, and a lot of that was because all of this was only half the story. With most games, you would always get instruction manuals, with reading them being my favorite method of realizing I'm a fucking moron. The instruction manual was a necessity back in the early days of gaming, giving you details on the controls, the story, the characters, basically everything you needed to know to get started. In-game tutorials were a rarity. Most NES games you just pop in and immediately start playing. Instruction manuals picked up the slack when it came to teaching you how to play the game or telling the story. This is definitely why so many NES games don't really tell you what to do or how to play because you were expected to read the manual. And oh boy, were these things made for reading. Plus, they all had a notes and memos section in the back where you could jot down little reminders. I don't think anybody actually did this, so I'll start the trend. Gotta use these more often. Look at the Legend of Zelda's manual. This is the culmination of everything that made these things so fun to flip through. All this colorful art, tips and tricks, story details, the enemies' names, even a map. This is the titan of the retro video game manual. It's great when they came in full color and almost acted like mini strategy guides. When you truly love a game, you kinda wanna dive deeper and get a better look at the characters and story, and great manuals like this one let you do that at no extra cost. NES RPG and adventure games got the best booklets. Star Tropics, Final Fantasy, Zelda 2, Dragon Warrior, all of these things got full color platters of information with extra art drawn just for it, maps, the works. It's great to see exclusive artwork in these things. Bubble Bobble had its story explained through a comic, and Mario 3's is just so much fun to look through. But not all manuals were created equally. Keep in mind, this was the era of English, mistranslations, made-up plots, spelling errors, or just completely wrong statements, all par for the course when it came to NES manuals. Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest, congratulations! You now own the authentic Konami home version of Simon's Quest, one of Konami's many original arcade hits. Konami lied to me? I love the game screenshots. Sometimes they literally just slammed a Kodak in front of the screen to take a picture. Other times I guess they did the same but added a negative effect to everything to make it easier to see in black and white. Manuals would continue to get better and better over time, even when they became more and more unnecessary. Around the SNES and Genesis era, games started to become more conscious, offered tutorials, became less cryptic, but that didn't stop manuals from really hitting it out of the park. The best ones felt like an extension of the game's world. Like, oh man, it feels like I'm with Marcus Phoenix right now, where did all this blood come from? Or just when the manual retains the style of the game, like with Red Dead Redemption. Rockstar knows how to manual. You know with them you're getting a nice thick booklet and a huge map or a poster, it's great. Even in the golden age of manuals, not everything was amazing though. You knew a game was probably not a top priority to a publisher when the manual was in black and white. It was almost a warning sign that the game you bought was stupid garbage. Not always the case, but you knew a publisher really cared when they gave you full-blown color, multiple languages, like wow. They care. Nintendo, you old dogs. Almost every Nintendo first-party release since the SNES gave us these manuals you need spark notes for. Full color, and with the Wii, multiple languages, plus these fun little flyers giving you Donkey Kong upskirts and some new game suggestions. Hey Skyward Sword fans, you'll love Wii Play Motion. Hey look, I'm in Wii Play Motion. Even when they did stuff like re-release GameCube games on the Wii via the new Play Control series, they completely redid all the manuals. They could have just changed up the control layout page and bada boom, they're done. But no, they pretty much made new ones from scratch. But they didn't retain this page from the original Pikmin manual. Come on. Things were going pretty alright in the world of folded pieces of paper with staples through it until the latter half of the Xbox 360 PlayStation 3 era, when manuals became more of a dying art form. Less and less time went into them. More often than not, you'd see black and white, and they consistently got thinner and thinner. Sometimes they just gave a small control layout on a single folded piece of paper. These could be charming. Nintendo did a lot of this with the 3DS, and this worked fairly well. I'm cool with this, although I'd prefer more detail. But hey, it could be worse. It could be a complete waste of my eye resources, because there were some games that didn't even want to do the bare minimum. I mean, at this point, you might as well just give up. If you're gonna include an instruction manual, include an instruction manual, even if it's just a control layout. At least some people will get use out of that. It can be a legitimately helpful little booklet, even if it's all in black and white and just a folded piece of paper. When you just barf some terms and conditions garbage out here, you're effectively really wasting paper. Sure, a real manual uses more paper and more ink, but some people will actually get use out of it. If you're gonna use paper, actually use paper for something useful. Go and pop the terms and conditions on the inside of the artwork or on the back of the box art. Now, this whole death of the manual thing going on could easily be associated with recent years in gaming. But let it be known that Home Improvement on the SNES was one of the most influential games of all time since it kick-started the revolution of not including manuals. Real men don't need instructions. The manual writer really stuck it to us there. The death truly sat in for me with the release of Smash Bros. Ultimate. Here's a series that always prides itself in including manuals of the thick honkin' variety. Man, when you're holding a copy of Smash Bros. Brawl, you know it. Look at all this. Even Smash Bros. For 3DS and Wii U, these were released when manuals were this. They showed you all the characters and their moves. This wasn't as in-depth as previous manuals, but still solid. But when we open up Smash Bros. Ultimate, nothing. And now instruction manuals are more so reserved as a premium bonus and special releases and not much more. Now, the space generally reserved for manuals are used for DLC codes, terms and conditions, or advertisements. Can't wait to pop open Sonic Mania Plus. I mean, let's be honest, when they were actively being produced for every game, it was pretty rare you'd actually crack out a manual. It was kind of something to flip through right after you bought the game in the passenger seat on the road home. Now, why do I say this? Well, take a look at the electronic manual. Who the hell uses this thing? I'm sure most people didn't even know loads of games have electronic manuals, but they're here. The thing is, barely anybody, even people who know the e-manual exists, have ever said, I don't know what to do, to the electronic manual. Most of the time, people just look up questions they have online. I mean, it's probably quicker to do that than hit the home button on the Wii U, click the electronic manual, and wait for it to load. It is kind of sad to me that the electronic manual got overlooked because some of them are really fun and have a lot of love shoved into them. These legitimately feel like the old manuals, but now in a form that allows for cool things like animation. And now some games have manuals basically built into them. The only example I can think of off the top of my head is Mario Odyssey, and I mean, it's something that people really didn't use. So I think that shows that tutorials and in-game storytelling have replaced the instruction booklet, and the only reason we liked them was because they were tangible items. You turn a manual into a PDF, almost everybody kind of loses interest. But still, now that they're gone, every time I open up a new game, it's just disappointing. It feels like something should be here, and it almost never is. Now, one great new trend with a lot of physical games is art on the inner sleeve. Since most game cases are transparent, some companies have been printing art on the inside, which is always a treat to see. It's kind of a nice way to bring a little bit of the instruction manual back without wasting paper. Sure, I'd rather get a nice thick paper booklet and see the earth get polluted the f*** up, but I'll gladly take this. It gives you something to gawk at when you open a case up, and it's way better than Terms and Conditions McGee over there. You can find manuals and stuff like special releases of indie titles, but that's about it. Red Dead 2 came with a map, but no booklet, and Nintendo basically dropped paper inserts entirely with Switch games. Things aren't looking too good for these guys, and it's pretty crazy they're being treated as premium bonuses nowadays. I loved flipping through manuals to games I loved. I actually remember bringing a few manuals to daycare to flip through, but like with magazines and demo discs, they're obsolete, and if you bring them back, it's cool, but not a lot of people are actually going to use them. Even though they're all but gone and they weren't used that much to begin with, they'll always have a place in my and countless others' hearts. Well, as a tribute to the instruction manual, I will fully commit to one and carry out whatever it tells me to do. Hey all, Scott here. I just got back from an art auction and I'm really excited to finally have such a pristine piece of art in my home. It's something people look at and say, oh shit, I just realized this is the box art for Wario World. What's the first thing you think of when you hear Super Bust a Move? Wrong. This. Are video games art is one of the dumbest questions out there in my opinion. Of course they are. One video game can include millions of pieces of art in itself. 3D models, backgrounds, textures. Literally, if just one thing from a video game was smacked onto a piece of paper and hung up in an art museum, it wouldn't stick out at all. But now when all this art with musical pieces, acting, and writing is put into this one thing you can control, it's disqualified as a form of creative expression. Seriously, why is this even a debate? A fork is art, why can't arms be? Art is subjective. I personally believe anything and everything can be considered art in some way, though I don't understand why video games have had a rough history being considered it. I think it's an argument primarily made by old guys who just think video games are nothing more than Space Invaders and are just silly things people waste their lives on. I guess something like some fish painted by Andy Warhol carries more meaning behind it than Pac-Man. I mean, this was just made as a cheap joyride in a pizza parlor. This was made to be sold for lots of money to be displayed in some rich guy's living room. This is art. For those who still don't believe video games are art, I will bring up one last thing. The video game's box art. I mean, it says art right there. There's no escape from this one. Art made to advertise and represent more art. A video game's box art is generally one of the first things I think of when the game's name is brought up. It's the image that's supposed to represent everything that game is and the first thing you see when picking up a game, for better or for worse. Seeing the finalized box art is one of my favorite moments with the build up to a game's release. I love seeing how artists take everything you need to know about the game and cram it into one image. It's the picture you'll see whenever popping the case open to play it, how the product will look on store shelves, the main image that will forever be associated with the game. Box art doesn't seem that important at first, but it's way more crucial than you may think. Good box art needs to be a perfect balance between marketing, good-looking art and composition, and an accurate representation of the actual game. Atari got two of these, right? The Atari 2600 had some of the most gorgeous box art ever, but the problem was the box looked like this and the game looked like this. Box art was too good in this era. Most video game purchases were completely based off of the box art at this time. Without the internet, consumers would just walk into the store and pick the game with the most appealing name and artwork, which of course led to some hearty buyer's remorse with a lot of these games. In my opinion, this was one of the factors of the video game crash of 1983. Low quality products were flooding the market. The fact that most of them had appealing art on the cover made people want to buy them, and when they bring it home, it made them want to swear off video games for life. Activision did a pretty good job conveying what their games were like via the covers, but that also made these things crazy boring. Look at this! When Nintendo brought out the NES in 1985, they didn't want to repeat Atari and all the other video game manufacturers' mistakes. One of the key examples of this is their choice of box art with their early titles on the console. Instead of, whoa, we got, the black box NES games were Nintendo published titles that weren't trying to fool anybody, just sprite art from the game, that's it. Yeah, that was pretty boring, especially compared to what they got in Japan with the Famicom, but they thought it was necessary. There's no way you can mislead a consumer with a box like this, even though I'm sure this tactic ensured nobody would buy Clue Clue Land. What the hell kind of game do you think this is? This didn't last long though, as Nintendo and all other publishers got a lot more creative with box art, and it was for the best. Sure, we were getting dangerously close to Atari levels of misrepresenting the actual product, but the NES was far more capable of displaying graphics. Atari required you to use your imagination a lot more, and while the box art gave you a good idea as to what you should be picturing the game as sometimes they were reaching. On the NES with something like Ninja Gaiden, yeah, that looks like a ninja. Batman, yeah, that looks like a Batman. NES Open Tournament Golf, yeah, that looks like a golf. The box art looked a billion times better than the actual games, but they weren't too far off to the point where it felt like you were getting ripped off most of the time. Of course, with games in this era, we got some of the most legendary boxes of all time, some absolutely gorgeous artwork. And some very poorly drawn ones, but hey, at least we got all of these. Back then, a shield, a sword, or some magical orb was enough to tell you this is a fantasy adventure game. A lot of the NES box art could be considered either super detailed, well-painted epics, simple cartoon character front and center, or stolen assets. The original Metal Gear cover, ripped right from Terminator. Castlevania 2, this Dungeons & Dragons cover. Contra, Predator. But hey, at least these all look nice. The Sega Master System tried a unique tactic with box art. As one of Nintendo's main competitors in the 8-bit era, right when they started, they decided to give up. It's pretty obvious they were attempting something like what Nintendo did with the black box games, but instead of actual sprite art from the games, they opted for clip art creators to draw one small picture and smack it on graph paper. These boxes have their charm, but for all the wrong reasons. They're not actually good, but it's such an iconic part of the Master System's image here in North America that it's somewhat endearing. And then I look at the boxes other countries got. Please God, explain this. Box art in the early to mid 90s began to become something special. The Sega Genesis and SNES had the capabilities to display graphics even more on par with the actual cover. With these games, it's like the artist took something that happens in the game and made a piece of artwork out of it, instead of drawing what the game was meant to represent like with previous generations of box art. Not only was everything becoming better representations of the actual video game, but the art itself was becoming better and better. There was also the box art for Phalanx. Some of the most iconic SNES and Genesis box art had so many little details crammed into them, while others remain simple and elegant. Sure, some of these are so cheesy it stings nowadays, but they do a good job representing the game, and it's obvious these weren't consumed by marketing strategies and were just following a template to ensure great sales. It felt like an artist was just doing what they thought would look cool. But then 3D games started to become the norm, and because of that, we reach an ugly era of box art. You just squirt a 3D model of a character that doesn't age well onto a cover and bada bing bada boom, we have a box. Box art felt more like a screenshot rather than actual box art. Well, these were kinda cool at the time with 3D really starting to take over. The PS1, early PS2 era of box art definitely wasn't as timeless as I'd want it to be, and really isn't my favorite. A lot of these feel cheap and tacky. You look at box art that was hand-drawn and it's gorgeous, you can feel the passion behind it. For Sonic art, let's just have 3D models of Sonic and friends running instead of the spectacular 2D art. Why? This generation wasn't terrible, there was definitely some good stuff, but this was the beginning of a trend in box art that's led us to where we are now. We very rarely see art like this anymore because there's no need for it. You can take an in-game model, spruce it up with extra detail and maybe a higher polygon count and blam. Now, I don't think most box art nowadays is bad. I think most AAA games have great composition. Everything is aligned in satisfying ways. With a fair amount of them, it's easy to get what the game is going to be about. The overall art is well done, but a lot of the soul is gone. Like, you think somebody made BioShock Infinite's cover art and said, yep, I'm proud? Like I said with modern box art, the overall composition is fine. This is one of the worst box arts I've ever seen. Yes, a lot of this showcases stuff that does indeed represent BioShock Infinite in some manner, but it's so obvious this was done for marketing purposes. Oh, we're trying to advertise this game to men who want to shoot things. Hey, here's Booker DeWitt with a gun! Honestly, this could be the cover to like a billion other games and it would work. This doesn't represent Infinite to me at all. It literally focuses on somebody you barely see in the game because it's in first person. It doesn't feature any of the game's setting, just fire and sky, no other major characters featured, nothing. For a game as thematically unique as BioShock Infinite, this box art doesn't display anything that makes it unique. Now, there is a reversible cover which does a much better job representing the game. A lot of companies do this, having an alternative cover, more often than not one that does a better job representing the game, on the other side, so if you don't like the standard art conjured up by marketing folks, well, you can just flip it, here you go. My problem with this is I like all my games to be as uniform as possible, so with something like BioShock Infinite, I gotta stick to the regular art sadly to keep that cursed Xbox 360 logo on the spine. At least with the Game of the Year edition, they added Elizabeth, which I think makes it a much better representation of the actual game, considering she's the most memorable and iconic character of that game. Now, if we're staying in the year 2013, we can take a look at The Last of Us as an example of good modern box art. This shows off the dynamic between the characters of Ellie and Joel. Ellie gets top billing with Joel looking back at her ensuring her safety. This box art tells a story and perfectly represents the final game. Of course, the higher-ups tried to cut Ellie from the box art entirely and make it just about Joel, and thankfully Naughty Dog refused. Actually, I have the original box art for The Last of Us that marketing execs wanted for the game. Oh. With BioShock Infinite being multi-platform and The Last of Us being exclusive to the PS3 at the time, BioShock Infinite did sell more than The Last of Us initially. But how much you want to bet it's because it was on multiple platforms, not because some generic guy with a gun was on the cover. The Last of Us sold 7 million units on the PS3 alone, with Infinite selling around 11 million across everything. I don't think that gap was because of the box art, it was because of console exclusivity. But I'm sure the higher-ups look at those numbers and assume it was all in the box art. Companies seem to be obsessed with having marketable covers. They all seem to push the same exact template for guaranteed high sales, but I think that makes a lot of covers feel completely generic. This isn't Doom. You're trying to tell me we go from the first Doom with box art like this to this? I've seen this argument online so many times about this particular cover, but it's true. This could be any shooter with a sort of mech suit, it's terrible. We do get a reversible cover, which was the main cover of the Nintendo Switch version of the game that released later. I guess they thought, people know this is a good game now, we can give the Switch the better box art. They did a similar thing with Wolfenstein 2 as well. But the generic box art complaint, the one that says this can be any game, in my opinion, is a huge problem, and it's something we primarily see here in the States. From what I've noticed, while North America can have some great box arts, they seem to be more marketing focused. Japan can get stupid artsy with them, and more times than not, Japan usually gets the better box art out of all territories. And then there's Europe. It's a complete gamble if Europe gets either the Japan art, the North American art, or just whatever the hell they conjure up over there. Box art regional differences are fascinating, one of the more well-known ones being the Kirby series, with North America mostly pissing Kirby off. Japan usually has Kirby being Kirby, happily posing with his friends or just having a good time. I'm sure here Nintendo of America wasn't trying to make Kirby angry, but rather make him look determined, like he's on some epic quest or something. And that way some people will go, oh, he looks cute, and others go, oh, he looks badass. America likes things to be on a huge epic scale, I've noticed. As an example, another great modern cover, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. This is the perfect box art for this game. Even Link, the central character here, isn't looking at the viewer, he's looking away at the main focus of the game, its world. It's in the title, Breath of the Wild. It gives off the vibe that the world within the game is about to give you the adventure of a lifetime, which is in fact what it does. While Japan had the same art, Europe went for a different take. This doesn't feel like an epic quest, this feels like elf shit. This is still very good art, but I feel like the actual game is more well represented via the North American and Japanese versions. This one, Link isn't even looking at what awaits him, he's looking directly at you. And while you see more of the world in the European cover, the overall tone and color scheme is happy and jovial, which isn't really what I think of with this game. The world is in ruins, you have to save it, which I think comes across more with this one. One of the more notorious regional changes was Eco. You see, this one tells a story. This one tells me what toy I'm gonna get in my Happy Meal. You see what I meant with the PS1 early PS2 era? We got this. Somebody thought this was good. Resident Evil 4 is one I'm sure I'll get flack for here. The European covers across the GameCube, PS2, and Wii are so cool looking. These are terrible in comparison, but I think they do a much better job showcasing the actual game. This is a rare case where this looks better, this would be a great poster, but I think these are better box arts for the game. Let's be honest here, Resident Evil 4, as good as it is, isn't as artsy-fartsy as this cover suggests. Again, this is way better, but this tells you what to expect. North American marketing with video games has always been a lot more loud, wacky, and obnoxious compared to other countries, and while that reached its peak in the 90s and has died down tremendously by now, it still seeps through with modern box art while other regions get beautiful, more simplistic images. Nier Automata's Japanese box art is absolutely gorgeous, while the North American variety looks cheaper and sort of cheesy in comparison. Some designs are so simple that they're oddly beautiful in a way. You feel a sense of pride and confidence with them, like, hey, we don't need art, our game's that good. Like so many of the early Zelda games basically just shouted, yeah, this is a Zelda game, f you. You don't need anything else, just a logo on a golden background. That says something. Final Fantasy did this in Japan with white backgrounds and either beautiful artwork on top or just the logo for the game plus the artwork corresponding with it. This is a beautiful trend if it's kept up with. It makes all these games feel that much more, well, Final Fantasy. But if you do it for just one game, it's sorta lame. I'm sorry, but the Metal Gear Solid box art doesn't feel beautiful to me. It just feels lazy and weird. No other games in the series did the white background with just a logo, so it just sorta sticks out, which blows. I love seeing sequels go for a similar style to previous games with their covers. Borderlands 2 was a fantastic evolution of the first game's art, so was Mario Galaxy 2, all the Grand Theft Autos following 3. These all feel like they belong together. But then Fallout just kept doing the same thing but with different angles. You know what kind of games have a tough time with box art? Re-releases, and definitely some collections. Like, do you just use the same art as before? Do you spruce it up? Do you do something completely different? And with collections, do you display all the games, have multiple box arts in one box art? Ugh. Well, some were whipped together in an afternoon in Photoshop, some had some genuine thought and time put into them. Sonic's Ultimate Genesis Collection nails it. It doesn't have to have marketing lingo thrown on there like this number of games included. Sonic's front and center, he grabs your attention and you see all the Genesis title screens in the background. It's obvious what this is from the get-go. You don't need any taglines, you don't even need the title. This image is enough. And then there's Dreamcast Collection. This is just a mishmash of all different kinds of things. Colors, shapes, obsolete video game consoles, text at different angles, Jesus. Re-releases usually go a little more wild with the art compared to the first release, showing off more characters and elements from the game. The first go around they were trying to sell the game to people who didn't know if it was good or not, and now people already know it's worth, so why not do something that looks a bit cooler? Maybe throw a bit of fan service in there. But while some of these are cooler pieces of art, they do lose a lot of the iconic feel or simplicity of the original. Twilight Princess HD just throws a bunch of characters on the cover. It looks fine, but the original will always be the Twilight Princess cover to me. It's not cluttered, it is laser focused on showing how this guy and this wolf are the same person. But then look at the Japanese and European cover for the HD remake. It's literally the original with more shit on it. This just looks weird to me. Hey, does anybody know how many games are included in the Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy? This had a temporary box art for the longest time, and I kept praying, oh please God, give us something better for the final one, and hey, they delivered. I could go without the constant reminders of how many things are included, but this feels like the way to do a modern Crash cover. Nintendo did a lot of these temporary boxes during the Wii U generation. It always freaked me out, like I'd see an article online saying Nintendo reveals Breath of the Wild box art during E3 2016, and then I see it, and I start praying this isn't final. Thankfully, all the terrible box art changed soon enough, and hey, the Wii U generation was home to some great covers. Like Mario Tennis Ultra Smash is one of the worst things humanity has ever done, but at least they made the box art better. I always found it kinda cute whenever something would overlap the console logo on the front. Nintendo box art is never like the most artistically special thing in the world, but they almost always look really nice. You have New Super Mario Bros. U. This box art shows off exactly what the game is gonna be like, just not nearly this clean and pretty. It's like fast food photos compared to real life. They almost always know exactly what a game needs box art wise. Striking poses for characters, good title placement. Every now and then we have a misfire, but it's never, that bad. They usually know which games need that old marketing flavor text. 5 games in 1, up to 4 players, idea book included. These little phrases often help showcase what makes the game stand out, and they don't take up too much room. Yeah, and even Batman has nosebleeds from time to time. It's okay, guys. Yeah, when all this garbage covers up the artwork for literally no reason, that's pretty raw. Oh wow, Nier Automata is riveting. I wasn't gonna buy it, but now I'm sold. The worst box art is hilarious to look at. Like, what is this? That's not a duck. But it's so heartbreaking when great games just get garbage. Castlevania Symphony of the Night, look at this. And then here in North America, they said, well, we know what Castle and Knight are. Now, with my personal preference, I like something pretty and nice and satisfying to look at. I like something that represents the game well, but I also really value uniqueness with my video game covers. Sure, if a cover isn't unique, that can also be criticism directed towards the actual game for not being original enough, but here's a game that I love, with box art I just don't like. One of the most disappointing covers in my opinion is Spider-Man PS4. I finally started playing this game recently. I just beat it. It's amazing, one of my favorite PS4 games. But the fact that this box is literally just Spider-Man on a red background is disappointingly bland and boring. Don't get me wrong, this looks fine, it's nice, but look at Breath of the Wild. A key part of this box art and game is the world. The same goes for this. A key part of Spider-Man PS4 is the open world New York City. The fact that none of it is displayed here really makes this art lack in my opinion. I also don't like how it's just overwhelmingly red. It doesn't make Spider-Man pop out as much as I'd want him to. But really, my problem with it is this could be the cover to any Spider-Man game. That does say something about how definitive of a Spider-Man game this is, but it does enough of its own things that I just don't like how it's so generic. Like I said, it feels like with so many pieces of box art nowadays, while they fundamentally look nice, just follow the same template. It's always a guy walking towards you, characters at the top faded at bottom showing a bigger picture, while box art from a few console generations ago, yeah sure, this art isn't as nice looking, things can be off model, and it can be pretty corny. This feels like an artist did what they wanted to, and this feels like corporations creating the perfect marketable box art, and nobody likes to feel marketed to. I think currently in the digital age where more games you'd never believe would do well sell like crazy due to the internet helping spread word, companies are more willing to get creative, and we've seen more unique and well done covers that represent their games well. It's great to see. I just hope marketing doesn't start to take over like it did with a few key games. So now that I've proven the validity of video games as art, or at least box art as art, I feel like I can convince anybody to do anything, which is why I'm gonna start this rant against serial killers. Here's a message to all you serial killers out there. Stop!